So there have been many prominent conservatives, many prominent, I guess you could call them Trump supporters with verified accounts on Twitter. They're very well known in the digital realm, of course, very well known online, who have been being banned completely from Chase Bank, being banned from having a personal account with Chase Bank. We saw one particular story, and we thought maybe possibly could be an outlier. Then we saw another person don't go down, and then we saw another person go down. And so we're going to run through those stories with you today. Also got a statement from one person who was banned by Chase Bank to tell his story. We're going to run through all those stories today and kind of tell you the absurdity, kind of tell you the gravity, and show you what's going on in America today, where people are being ridiculed, people are being depersoned for their political views. Let's get into it. But first, this video is kindly sponsored by My Patriot Supply. Now, I'm not a guy that's going to tell you it's all going to soon come to an end. Get to your bunker and start prepping. But I will tell you that having at least a month's supply of dry food for you and your family is probably a good idea. A localized natural disaster is probably the most likely. However, the dollar collapsing or an EMP or something similar can happen. So if you want to stock up on dried food storage, visit preparewithvincent.com today to get $100 off of a 4-week food supply that has a 25-year shelf life. We all probably stock up on ammo. Make sure to stock up on food too, just in case. And so here we go, another financial fascism. Chase Bank deplatforms another conservative. Chase keeps shutting down conservatives. Build your own bank. Build your own economy. It's a free market. This is the letter that she received. Conservative commentator and former burlesque dancer Martina Markota, we don't agree with her lifestyle, of course, has joined an elite list of Trump supporters who have had their Chase Bank accounts shut down in recent weeks. And here's the letter that she received. We have decided to close your account. And she has a verified account on Twitter, by the way. Here's her tweeting about this. Don't do business with Chase Bank. Verified account on Twitter, for now. Anyway. Here's what you need to do. We enclose an important account closing information outlining the steps you may need to take. We have decided to end our relationship with you. We cannot support you anymore. You've received this letter as an account owner and should share this information with others listed on the account, even though we are closing your banking account and or investment accounts. Any Chase auto, mortgage, and student loan or lease accounts you may have with us will remain open for the time being until we decide to close those. Please continue to make regular payments. You will receive additional account closing notifications if you have other accounts using a different name or address. Now, this is something that happened to another person as well, a Proud Boy leader. His bank account, same exact letter, will be closing the following accounts. And it says, after careful consideration, we have determined we can no longer support your banking accounts and will be closing it on April 1st, 2019. Please accept our apology for the inconvenience. Enrique Tarrio, who is the chairman of the Proud Boys fraternal organization, had his personal Chase Bank account shut down abruptly earlier this week. In a letter obtained exclusively by Big League Politics, the letter informs that he must shut down all of his accounts by April 1st, 2019, without giving a reason. But we have several people who this is happening to. As a matter of fact, Joe Biggs also had his account shut down.
I got an email saying my account was closed. That was it. Not like, hey, we're going to close it in 2 days. It's closed. So I went to the local bank location here. The lady said that it was locked at a higher level, and there's nothing that she could see. It was beyond her. So she called headquarters, whatever you call it, Chase Executive, and all they told her was, we can't discuss this with you, but there's a letter in the mail explaining why. Still haven't received a letter.
So many prominent people on Twitter with verified accounts, many prominent people who are prominent conservatives or have made a name for themselves online or whatever the case may be, have been shut down by Chase Bank, their personal accounts. Along with Markota, Proud Boys chairman Enrico Tarrio, and Trump-supporting Army veteran Joe Biggs have had their Chase accounts shut down in recent weeks. Speaking to Big League Politics, Markota explains that the account was shut down was linked to an Indiegogo campaign, which she had raised over $34,000 for a graphic novel she was working on, making the account shut down all the worse. Upon getting a notice of her account shut down, Markota contacted Chase Bank by phone to ask why her account was shut down. They refused to tell me why, Markota said. They said that they have the right to end our relationship and not to tell me why. She began to believe that her bank account shutdown was politically motivated after reading Big League's politics story on Torrio. This suspicion is well warranted considering the fact that her outspoken support for President Trump has exposed her a torrent of harassment in recent years. Marcota's former co-workers and her burlesque days have been on a crusade to make her life miserable ever since she came out as a Trump supporter. The harassment got so bad that Marcota is pursuing legal action against the most vicious commentator. It is unclear if Marcota's account was shut down is politically motivated. Of course, it's pretty clear. But considering the series of shutdowns in recent weeks, it seems very likely. So this is according to Big League Politics. We go back to this particular story about the Proud Boys founder. The Proud Boys, despite being simply a fraternal organization that believes in Western culture, have been smeared as a hate group. Gavin McGinnis, the group's founder, is currently suing the SPLC over their hate group label. Since the Daily Beast article, Torrio has been facing an onslaught of targeting by both tech companies and financial companies. He tells Big League Politics that he's been banned from the following services, among others: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Airbnb, First Data, Square, Stripe, PayPal. Make your own payment processors. Speaking to Big League Politics, Torrio questions why so many major companies feel the need to target him. Quote, "My political views pretty much mirror those of President Donald Trump," Torrio says, "but the media and groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center smear me, trying to tie me, an Afro-Cuban, to ideologies that would force me out of my own country if they went into effect. It's completely asinine and based completely outside of reality." So we have Joe Biggs, who's been banned from Chase Bank. We have Marcota, who's been banned from Chase Bank, her personal account as well. I don't really particularly agree with her lifestyle choices or her previous lifestyle choices, and I'm kind of hesitant to defend someone with those type of lifestyle choices. However, this is for the greater good, I would say, in making this more public and getting more people to voice their opinion to Chase Bank about what's going on, because this is absolutely ridiculous, obviously. And then, of course, we had the Proud Boys founder, who was shut down as well. Now that he's lost his bank account, his life will become much more difficult, as Torrio explained. "How am I supposed to get food to feed my family? Are taking the directions of the governor of Virginia and trying to abort me 34 years after birth?" Torrio questions. "They are essentially midlife abortion. They are essentially denying my existence and trying to force me into homelessness and ultimately death." Torrio believes that unless President Donald Trump steps in, the deplatforming and dehumanization of conservatives will continue. He needs to step in, not only because if he doesn't, he will lose in 2020 with all of his supporters being kicked off social media, but because it's the right thing to do, Torrio finishes. And this is a true statement. I believe that, eventually the support will fold because, things that need to be going on aren't going on, unfortunately. Things that need to be done aren't being done. Instead, we're taking advice from Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump on how many more immigrants we could bring into this country legally. And so, as long as they're legal, we can bring in millions. Anyway, so there you go. That's Chase Bank for you, and soon to probably be Bank of America, and soon to probably be all of the other banks, and soon to probably be all the payment processors, and soon to probably be all the social media companies, and soon to probably be all the mortgage companies, and soon to probably be everyone and anyone and every company within America banning you for your political beliefs. That day is coming.
This is terrible. This is awful. This is very sad. I don't take any pleasure in this because I love Yvette Falaka. I'm not being... I want Yvette on every TV show every day from now until the end of time. And sad to say, Yvette has been told she's got to pay $11,000 to the President of the College of Republicans' lawyers to defray his costs. Now, for a normal Antifa member, 11,000 is more than they panhandle or steal in a year.
So somehow my old English teacher compared you speaking like an event like this to the persecution of Jews in Nazi Germany. I don't know how it got there, but
the only Jew being persecuted in Australia is me. If you really want to moan about me being, telling jokes you don't like, or those indigenous jokes go a bit far, What do you have to say about the left throwing rocks at police officers and beating up journalists? The left constantly provides us with examples of its own horrific hypocrisy. And that really is all that's required to win, because you need only provide one or two of those examples and you'll quickly find yourself ushered out of the room or asked to change the subject.
I'd like to compliment Milo on introducing my children to anti-feminism before I did myself.
Because I want them to be happy.
Of course.
I'm a nice person. I want people to be happy, and they won't be happy if they're feminists. The one thing feminists hate more than anything else is women who stubbornly won't make the choices that feminists wish they would. And talking about the supreme joy and value and profundity, life-changing value of being a mother is something that most of these vile, single, childless harridans cannot relate to and will never relate to and hate you for. So rub it in their faces, because life as one of us is great. You know, we have so much more fun than the other side. We just don't tell people about it. If you want to encourage people to live a happier, better, more virtuous life, don't tell them what to do. Show them that your way is better. Show them how happy and hot and fulfilled you are. This 18C is f***ing horrifying. This feelings-based law, the idea somebody could just say that you might have offended some hypothetical person and you could go to jail, you could have your life ruined, you could have your savings cleared out, your freedom taken away, your family destroyed, that the state, at the barrel of a gun, can force you not to hurt someone else's feelings. F*** that. Why aren't you all out in the streets?
What are your thoughts on net neutrality? The whole...
Oh, you're all wrong about it. Because everybody in this room thinks net neutrality is a good idea, and it isn't. You all think it's going to go to some sort of hellish corporate America-ruled, you know, dystopian hell where your email is going to get slowed down to a crawl because you can't afford the expensive whatever horse. All it's doing is taking the internet back to where it was a couple of years ago anyway. So if you're one of those people who reflexively thinks net neutrality sounds like a good idea, you're right. It does sound like a good idea, but you're wrong. It's terrible, and it's just another mechanism of government control, and I want the government out of that completely, out of that relationship. Just leave us to deal with the service providers, and if they screw up, we'll sign up with somebody else. Now, some people are born short, and they're never going to get taller, and they're always going to have that disability, like Ben Shapiro. Is determined to undermine and destroy the very principles that made itself possible. I sometimes wonder about being assassinated by angry lesbians, but if that's any indication of their aim, I don't think I need to worry too much. No fear of me having a George Bush dodging the shoe moment when they can't even reach the second row. You losers. I have here the shoe that was hurled at me last night by that sweaty miscreant. Now I had to have it cleansed so I could bring it on stage and show you. It is repugnant. Look at it. It's some orthopedic hell. Oh, this is a mail order shoe. Imagine buying your shoes off Amazon. This is a mail order shoe. It's not even a real orthopedic shoe. It's got an insole in it. It's disgusting. This is the shoe that reached the stage. There was a second shoe that hit a poor lady sitting down there. I know. Well, the left always hurts women most.
I think as long as you're keeping people laughing, as long as what you say is twice as funny as it is offensive, you can get away with doing almost anything. Even if Andrew Bolt gives you a slap on the wrist afterwards.
When they come with their baseball bats
their facial piercings, their unwashed armpits, horrible grease-stricken hair. We should respond by organizing 10 more speeches they won't like. And when they come whining and spitting and hissing, crying that the First Amendment's really unfair, we should tell 10 even worse jokes. Formulate 10 even more offensive opinions, whether we believe in them or not. And use even more disgusting language, because the fringes of free speech is where freedom actually lives. It's Friday the 13th. We're skidding towards Halloween. What could be more frightening than some fetid BuzzFeed blogger trawling through 120,000 of your emails, trying to dig up dirt? It's funny that lefties suddenly believe in publishing stolen emails. Good to know, but if I'm a white supremacist, I am the worst one in history. I'm as bad at racism as Hillary Clinton is at winning elections. Is probably expecting me in this first public appearance since the article dropped to address some of the things in the piece that I think were unfair, unreasonable. I know, that people will have lingering questions, and that's certainly what anybody in my position would be advised to do. My response to that is, nah.
Talk about atheism because it's been one of the...
Why? It's so boring.
All right, so
boring. It's just a couple of people wrong in a room being very angry on the internet. There are lots of wrong people in the world, and one of the kinds of wrong people are atheists. The reason I have a go at atheists is because it's fun, because they're so thin-skinned. They're like libertarians, or they're like cyclists, or Liberal Democrats in the UK, or any other sort of, or feminists, in fact. So they're so easy to wind up. I mean, because of how many atheists did it take to change a light bulb, and before you've even given the punchline, people are furious, and there's a Reddit thread about it.
Atheist is only brought together by the lack of belief in a deity.
They're brought together by, sort of wispy facial hair, terrible spectacles, sort of long ginger ponytails, terrible thin-skinned natural sort of demeanor, hair trigger temper. These are the primary characteristics of an atheist.
Milo, look at me.
Socks and sandals,
those
terrible cheap chinos, all that kind of stuff.
Right,
that's what you want. If that's what you want to aspire to, then go right ahead. Fewer than 1 in 5 women in America describes themselves as a feminist, even though over 85% of them believe in inequality between the sexes. Why? Because they know that feminism has become something different now. They know that the feminism you're talking about, it's very convenient, isn't it, to sort of treat men like and then when people say I'm not a feminist, say, oh, but feminism's out of quality. That's not what feminism has become. It's not what feminism is anymore. Feminism is a mean, vindictive, spiteful, nasty, man-hating philosophy.
So
that has very little. Well, let me
promote...
finish, because I let you finish, okay? That has very little to do with the equality of the sexes, and a lot to do with man-hating. And the way that you know that is women are abandoning it in their millions. Women don't want feminism anymore. They have rejected your version completely. They don't agree with you. I agree with you that the black community has been treated like hell by both Democrats and Republicans. I just don't think Black Lives Matter is the answer. I don't think that throwing your toys out the pram and burning your own cities is the answer. I think better schools would help. Is that he could be up for Secretary of State. Mittens was the most... Oh, look what they've done. They've pulled the fire alarm. They've pulled the fire alarm. Good heavens. They're just trying to tell me I'm hot. I know. But, oh, well, we're staying, aren't we? We're staying. We're not going anywhere. We'll stay. Good. Good. What a pathetic fire alarm that was. It must have been installed by a liberal. I could barely hear it. Just this. It was like no. No, we shan't. Oh, it's loud. Oh, they've turned it up now. Oh, you see, this is what happens when the left can't win with arguments. They win with fire alarms.
You wrote a scathing review about Ghostbusters.
I thought it was quite measured. It's just that everybody else was lying that they liked the movie when nobody really did.
Tweets offended people. They just did. What do you say to those? What do you say to those people? I mean, it's the offensive comments that were made.
Yes, I say good. Good. If I offended you, that's me performing my function. and you should grow thicker skin and grow up. And so long as there are people who think that offense taking and having grievances is equivalent to some genuine kind of injury, I'm still necessary. You may disagree with me, that's fine, come debate me. But so long as there is a politics in this country, as there is, where people can turn victimhood and grievance into currency, I will continue to be as offensive as possible.
My view on this is that anybody who asks for a safe space or a trigger warning should be immediately expelled. They have demonstrated... They have demonstrated that they are incapable of meeting the requirements of their course. Why are you here? Why are you here if not to discover new ways of looking at the world, to discover thinkers and ideas, history, stuff you never imagined that was possible, to broaden your intellectual horizons? If you're not prepared to do that, go home, leave.
39% of British Muslims believe that a woman should always obey her husband. Where the feminists on that?
We're in a situation now where students can go to university, they come out dumber than when they went in. They are infantilized by safe space and trigger warning culture. The idea that interrogating a new idea, coming into contact with a school of thought or a person that doesn't conform to your prejudices is somehow problematic, that it gives rise to trauma.
Subjected to abuse that is saddening them and that is affecting them quite deeply. What advice would you give?
Toughen up. Toughen up. The majority of what's called abuse, harassment and trolling is ridicule. Sometimes it's strong ridicule. It's criticism. Sometimes it's strong criticism. But that's what the internet's for. And, you know, we're going to miss out on some really important, essential conversations if we don't allow people to communicate in the way that they want.
What I'm discovering as I talk to colleges, actually, is that the millennial generation, which many of us have written off as a generation that cares more about feelings than facts, has been very unfairly represented by a small vocal minority. Now, that minority has power on campuses, has power in the media, has power in the entertainment industry, has power in academia, all sorts of different environments. But I have faith that the millennial generation is more sensible than that.
Is there anybody in here who hates me? Anyone? Yes, there we go. Thank you. I'm afraid, this is an event for 7s and above, so anyone who just put their hand up, please leave.
I'm a feminist, and I'm proud to be a feminist, and a lot of what you say...
That's okay. I'm sure they'll cure you soon.
No.
There's chemotherapy for that.
No. What, I suppose, of course...
A lot of female voters who you might not have imagined would vote for Trump because of perhaps his locker room talk or whatever were voting for him anyway, and they loved him. Why? Because he was this strong, masculine figure who projected strength and maybe a little machismo versus the previous president who was, you know, limp-wristed and useless and never inspired. There were no women fainting in the aisles or you know, lightheaded on the chaise longue for Obama towards the end.
Women can do anything men can do, except math, chess, running, jumping, lifting stuff, fixing things, making money, hockey, surfing, driving, making decisions, being tall, taking out the garbage, tipping, fishing, being funny on purpose, reading a map, listening to good bands, writing, running the country, inventing anything important, or being fun to hang out with. Don't get me wrong, I love women, I just think they should drink from a separate water fountain. Hey, actually, women may be even better than men, but we'll never really know, since they're swinging at bigger balls, playing from closer tees, doing push-ups from their knees, taking half the Beatles' money, bitches, please!
Hi folks, I'm Gardner Goldsmith for MRCTV. You know, the so-called Green New Deal is big in the news, and many of us have chuckled or felt frustration seeing the fawning pop media praise it and its socialist sponsor, New York Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Heck, this proposal has already morphed more than a Mighty Morphin Power Rangers episode might see. It's already changed more than climate change. But it actually offers us an opportunity to do something we've been looking forward to here at MRCTV. It offers us the chance to present to you something that looks at how America could have gotten to this point, to actually see the principles that have been lost, the principles that used to praise individual initiative and warn us about the size of the state. Let's start this as I do in a lecture hall by looking back at definitions. And the first one we might want to approach is, what do we mean by man when we say man versus the state? Well, of course, I mean the old normative understanding of man, men, women, the individual, the human being. And that means that each human being controls himself or herself. Now, what's fascinating about this concept is that human beings going back to the Paleolithic era, when, of course, they could control themselves, actually came up with their own systems to better their lives. These were organic outcomes of human interaction and humans applying themselves to nature. And in fact, they developed tools to make life easier, to reduce toil and increase productivity. I often explain this to audiences by showing them the inclined plane. And of course, by increasing the distance and decreasing the angle of lifting a heavy object, the inclined plane allowed man to do more work. The work that one man could now do was formerly done by two. And of course, that freed up labor to go do something else. This brought economic benefit. It helped fulfill the desires of human beings to better their lives, to get more for their efforts and not less, and to progress. Now, likewise, human beings also developed non-physical tools, things like language. And one of the most important, which was one of the key non-physical machines, it's the concept of natural rights. The idea of non-aggression, the principle that you have a right to be left alone by me and I have a right to be left alone by you. It's the respect for one's neighbor's possessions and his or her life. And that mutual hands-offness concept has been passed down to us from generation to generation. Now, once we've understood that, it's time for us to look at another definition, and that is the definition of the word society. See, it's important to understand the word society because, well, society is that set of achievements, traditions, and standards that help pass down this idea of natural rights. It is brought to us by individuals freely acting on their own. They're driven by individual governance, individual self-interest, individual valuation, and individual volition. And of course, all of this pre-existed what we now know as government. So, what is government? Well, in philosophy classes, government is known as the state. It's the subgroup of human beings who, under various guises and rationales, claim a select distinction over others. These are people who claim the power to use aggressive violence and threats of it against others without being subject to the same shunning and ostracism that we might experience if we were to engage in that kind of aggression. Now, over the years, numerous philosophers have tried to justify this state, with early philosophers claiming that there was a so-called divine right of kings, where they were granted their power over subjects by God, and later philosophers like Thomas Hobbes and later John Locke and people like Jean-Jacques Rousseau claiming that there was something called a social contract. Yes, this was a social contract between each person and the monarch, oligarchy, or assembly that ruled over them. And of course, each philosopher assumed that this magical so-called social contract was done by majority rule, and that somehow this same majority rule also equated to individual consent. So you can see there's a problem there. Of course, it's utterly indefensible and it's impossible. They don't want you to realize, I'll just put it bluntly, that the state doesn't have contracts. It has subjects. But of course, this didn't stop many of these philosophers and most politicians and people who support pushing their neighbors around through the use of the state from pushing the idea that the state actually exists to protect you and your natural rights. Which brings up a bit of a problem. You see, Supposedly, the state is there to stop us from encroaching on each other's lives and each other's property. But the only way that the state can exist is by actually encroaching on your life and your property, by making claims to it. And of course, the only way government can get its money is not by asking for it, but by demanding it. So if we're stuck in this weird paradox, if we're stuck with the government under this dilemma where the state claims that its power is there to protect us, but it can only protect us by threatening us, then how do we deal with this? How do we actually protect our rights? Well, this has been one of the longest standing dilemmas in world history. And it is something that has barely been answered by many philosophers. And that's what we'll explore next time, as we use this opportunity and we hear these stories in the news about particularly noxious legislation, to explore these deep roots that we need to understand right now. Hey, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate the fact that people are interested in these very important questions and hopefully trying to come up with some answers. Don't forget to like and subscribe and to tell your friends about us. For MRCTV, I'm Gardner Goldsmith. Well, we all know contemporary news stories can be infuriating, but actually they give us crucial opportunities to see timeless principles that have been lost as the political class turns America into a collectivized command and control dystopia. So let's defend those principles right now and see how we got to this point in America in part 2 of our series of Man versus the Ever-Growing State. Hi everyone, I'm Gardner Goldsmith for MRCTV. And you know, in part 1 of this series, we took a very serious look at the fallacious so-called social contract, which is not in any way a real contract at all. There's no voluntary permission given, and it's been used by politicians as a rationale to rule over you. Well, even well-known philosophers such as John Locke made the mistake of saying that the state, i.e. the government, is there to protect you and your property from threats and theft by others. And yet, the only way that the state can exist is by taking your property and threatening your freedom. So, this is a major problem, and the Founding Fathers recognized part of this problem, and they took a cue from Aristotle when they wrote the rules for the first American government, the Articles of Confederation, and later, when they, unfortunately, through the prodding of centralizers like Alexander Hamilton, wrote the United States Constitution. But the problem remained. Something that 19th century American philosopher Lysander Spooner acknowledged, noting that even the U.S. Constitution is not a real contract, but is something forced on people with the demand that they accept the U.S. federal government or flee to another place that is also going to infringe on their rights, probably to a greater extent. And Spooner noted that the Constitution has not stopped the federal politicians from taking more power and infringing on more of our rights. So, how do we exist in such a system, one that is predicated on a non-existent so-called contract that's actually forced on us, and one where the politicians are barely, if at all, holding themselves to their own oaths to uphold that document? Well, this is where the final vestige of founding thought actually becomes very important. It's the concept of decentralization, the concept of smaller spheres of control. You see, in both economics and in politics, there's a principle about the difference between small spheres of control and large spheres of control. In large spheres of control, the people making the decisions often don't have the localized knowledge and information to make proper decisions. Therefore, you're going to see many more bad decisions versus local spheres of control. In large spheres of control, the people who make those bad decisions can harm more people when they make those decisions. And in fact, it's more difficult to escape large spheres of control. In smaller spheres of control, you not only have the information on hand, but you can also flee more easily to another area. It's not exactly a competitive market system, but it's closer. It doesn't actually let you withhold your money because there is going to be some form of government wherever you are, but it does allow you to switch over, which is closer to a competitive system. And competition is extremely important to see responsiveness to the consumer. In fact, this is the sort of thing that Thomas Jefferson made sure he expressed in 1798 in his Kentucky Resolutions, where he expressed the concept of nullification by the states. Nullification of unconstitutional federal laws. And it's something that we're starting to see pop up now in contemporary America. In the Western United States, we're starting to see people in those areas protesting the fact that the United States government runs the Western lands. Those are lands that should not be in federal control. They should actually be under state control according to the Constitution. So this principle is alive and could be very well right now and growing if the word gets spread about it. It's a lesson that we can pull out of all this frustration we see as politicians push in Washington, D.C. for more collectivism. It's something that we can thank the Founding Fathers for handing down to us, and perhaps we can hand on to our progeny. In our next part, we'll talk about some of those areas where the federal government has encroached, and we'll offer some dire warnings about what those things could bring about. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. For MRCTV, I'm Gardner Goldsmith.
A 1-year-old boy was shot in the head in Chicago on February 7th and remains in the hospital fighting for his life after his mother was targeted by a gang member. But you didn't hear about him because the national media were too busy gushing over Jussie Smollett, who's turned out to be a big, fat liar. Around 5:30 p.m. on February 7th, 1-year-old Chase Irving was shot in the head in Chicago while sitting in a car with 2 other children after police say a gang member targeted his mother and missed. Chase's grandmother quickly drove her grandson to a nearby hospital in critical condition, where he now faces countless surgeries and an unknown future. He's 1. Now, police say they haven't yet caught the shooter who may very well have ended this little boy's life, but they did put nearly 24 officers on the Jussie Smollett hate crime investigation, only to find out that Smollett had made the entire thing up. In fact, while Chicago PD were busy expending valuable resources and taxpayer dollars to look into Smollett's attack that wasn't, 67 people were shot in Chicago alone. They include 1-year-old Chase, 14-year-old Michael Orozco, 21-year-old Adrian Campos, and 23-year-old Nina Edwards. 8 of these shooting victims have died. These are the stories that fall through the cracks while the national media spend hours salivating over fake hate crimes that they can use as political weapons. Between the time the Smollett story broke on January 29th and February 14th, the 3 major news networks spent 157 minutes gushing over every tiny detail on their nightly news programs. On top of that, Smollett got an exclusive interview aired on ABC's Good Morning America, starred in dozens of liberal lawmakers' tweets, got primetime moments on CNN, and was fawned over by the women on The View. But I bet you haven't heard Chase Irving's name until right now. And you know, it's not just Chicago shooting victims who get ignored. The left also ignores so-called hate crimes when they aren't politically convenient. James Phillips, for example, was arrested on February 16th after reportedly pulling a gun on Terry Pierce and his wife for wearing MAGA hats at a Kentucky Sam's Club. Now, unlike Smollett's story, this one included multiple witnesses, surveillance video, and a credible police report. Where was that story, CNN? Oh, that's right. You guys were too busy falling all over yourselves over a hoax that wasted taxpayer money, took up police resources, could have led to an innocent person's arrest, and was used to paint millions of innocent Americans as violent racists because of their politics. I guess the joke's on you, as Jussie Smollett's now turned himself over to police and been charged with filing a false police report, which could net him 1 to 3 years in jail and a slew of fines. Oh, and by the way, for anyone who cares, Chase Irving, still on life support. And that's your Reality Check, America. Make sure you like us on Facebook and Twitter, subscribe to our YouTube page, and stay sane out there.